Mic check, mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Oh, we speak Spanish. Buenas tardes, mi gente bonitas. ¿Cómo se sientes? Bien. Okay, so, no Spanish? Okay. How about French? I didn't even know. Come on, Tally Boo. ¿Cómo se va? Come on, Tally Boo. Straight up. Très bien, merci beaucoup. Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour. All right, well, welcome to the second panel. Je m'appelle. They speak French. Comment ça va? Well, my name is Ruben Pitch, and I have the pleasure and the honor of this second panel of these brilliant, brilliant young men. They're younger than I am. So I can say it. So our panel discussion is on rebuilding the importance of connections. So I'm going to give the authors, these brilliant individuals, an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Braden Anderson. I'm the author of Black Resilience, the blueprint for Black triumph in the face of racism.
Thank you, moderator. And I am Dr. David Glover. I am the author of Born Out of Pain, as well as my first book, which is Building and Maintaining Organizations. I am a psychologist as well as a South African ambassador for LGBT.
Good morning, everybody. Kevin Wayne Johnson. I am the author of this series of books titled Leadership from the Servant's Heart, because in my heart, I believe that better leaders help to make the world a much better place.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Camtron Cameron. I'm the author of the fantasy fiction book series Tales from Pangea. I'm an author, an actor, an animator, an artist, a director, and a model. And
There we go. Brilliant. So please give them a round of applause. So, an audience, I can let you know ahead of time, you will have time to ask a series of questions. So, but I have 5 questions starting off for our panel. First question, going from left to right. Why do you believe connections are important?
It's a good question. I think at the end of the day, the connections that you make with other people help inform your vision and perspective of the world, right? I know for me, in writing this book, it was really, really important that I leverage the connections from my community to pressure test my ideas, right? And make sure that I was on the right track. I mentor a lot of young law students and young lawyers as part of my work with the Metropolitan Black Bar Association in New York. And I would not have been able to put together the book that I was able to put together, but for the, their help in kind of making sure that I understood what the young people were thinking about, what they felt like the obstacles were in front of them. And so that I could make sure that the book really spoke to them and their particular concerns. And so I think we all have great ideas. You can be really smart and do a lot of research, but you have to go actually make connections in the community and make sure that you're seeing the world through the lens of the community and the people, modern, right there, going through it every day.
Thank you, I enjoyed that. I myself think of connectivity and its importance in triumphs, meaning that number one, you are to be first and foremost connected to your higher power, whatever you call that, whatever you answer to and believe in. And then you need to be connected to yourself. It is only after that you've met and satisfied those two connectivities that you are a better connector and have better connections with those who are around you. I think a lot of times we try and do symptomatic adaptations of how to connect better with other people, when the problem really is that you're not connected in yourself and you're not connected to your source. And so you are only then casting out what you are defensive about internally. So I think it's pivotal. Empirical data has shown us that connectivity is the lifeline of each person, that there's not a culture, there's not a group of people, a subgroup of people, that connectivity, everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to feel a part of something bigger than themselves. So I think just knowing that at its core root, we can actually look for the core problem, but I think it goes back into being connected to yourself and being connected to your higher power.
So, in addition to what we've heard from these two great men sitting on my left, think about this as it relates to human behavior. And this is why connection is so fundamental and foundational to who we are, really, as humans. Every person wants to be affirmed. Everybody wants to be connected to a tribe. And when every person shows up, they want to be included. Everybody, there's no exception. Men, women, boys, and girls, it doesn't matter the gender, the ethnicity, the culture, etc. And so it's foundational to who we are as humans. So when it comes to communication, we connect by building bridges, we connect on common ground, and we connect based on what we're interested in having a conversation about. And so connection is really foundational to who we are, just as people that are living on the earth. And it's very, very important. If you look across America, one of the many issues that we have in this nation, it's probably a global issue as well, but specifically in America, because this is where we live, we don't talk to each other.
That's true.
Because what you'll find is that when we do have a conversation and dialogue and communication, we have more in common than we do differences. And it's hard to dislike somebody that you know. Now, I know we know people that we don't like, but generally speaking, that's the issue that we have here in America. There's so much trepidation, if you would, for lack of a better word, just to have a conversation with someone. And when you do, you'll find that we have so much more in common. Now we can connect.
These are very hard to follow up, but on a basic level, connection is super important, because that's how we form the perspective, within each other, and definitely like the panel was saying, when you have a deeper connection with whatever word you would use, the creator, God, or whatnot, when you have that deeper connection with that entity, or the universe as a whole, then you can have a deeper connection and meaning with what goes around you, that trickles down to whatever the unit. But yeah.
All right, just hold on to the mic.
Let's go.
We're gonna go from right to left. So we're gonna add on to that question. As it relates to connections and building those correct connections and the importance of building relationships, where does forgiveness play a part in the importance of connection?
To me, forgiveness plays a big part in that, because when you have the connection, that bond, or that once you agree or comprehend each other's perspective, then forgiveness becomes possible. Forgiveness becomes a bigger thing, a part of growing as a person is being able to forgive would say forgiveness plays a little bit of a smaller role, but just as big of a role within connection to me.
If I were to add to that, the question, does forgiveness play a major part in building positive connections, the importance of connections?
The answer is undeniably, unequivocally yes, because forgiveness is for you and I.
That's right.
And more times than not, when it comes to taking that first step to making a connection with anybody, more times than not, it's going to be you and I to take the first step. So forgiving someone is for us, not so much for them. Now that gives us the impetus to approach them and to now have that conversation. And now we can make that connection. Because again, it's all about everybody wanting to be affirmed, everybody wanting to be a part of a tribe, and then ultimately everybody having a desire to feel included once they arrive in that tribe. And more times than not, as a result of being a person that's able to forgive, you're now giving yourself what it takes to take that first step and approach that person. And again, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, you are going to discover that you have so much more in common than you have differences.
Amen. For me, I totally agree with the resounding yes. I think it's important that we learn how to reframe forgiveness. I think that when we talk about connectivity, I'm going back to, I'll just keep digging down my same lane. When we talk about connectivity to God and ourselves, we've not really been taught how to frame God as a forgiving God. Most of our culture, and I'm steeped in part of my research and doctorate work is in religion. And so we framed the greater God, the good, gracious God. We talk about him being good and love and long-suffering, but we experience him as being a judge and with a gavel and a whip. And you got to live up to these standards, and he's very rigid and he's very stringent, which gives unforgiving. Even we talk about material and so on, we know that there's some material that's very forgiving, and then there's some material that's unforgiving. We have embraced, as a culture, a God who is not as forgiving, not as yielding. He's very black or white, heaven and hell, no gray areas, all those different things. And so we interpret that and internalize that into ourselves, not being forgiving to ourselves, not being gracious and yielding to ourselves. Thus, we magnify that out to our population and to our connections where we're not forgiving. It's either you did it or you didn't. There's no grace. There's no, it's the law and the letter of the law. So I think that when we're talking about it's vital and it's important and it's pivotal, but I think the problem is that we've misaligned our framing for forgiveness. So the conversation, we know to forgive, but we don't know how to forgive because we haven't learned how to forgive ourselves. We haven't learned that we are forgiven, before we've even messed up. And so it's that framing that we need to be talking about, not the importance, not to dismantle the question, but to bring even more burden to the thought, because it's easy for us to shake our heads in a sense. Yes, it's very important, but our daily lives reflect that is not how things work out. That's a espoused theory and not the theory in use, right? So I think that this is a necessary conversation, but go that extra mile and learn, what do you really feel about forgiveness? How do you feel forgiven? When do you know you are forgiven? What acts must I go through to be forgiven? Because again, we got to go to the altar, roll on the floor and speak in tongues and cast out devils before we feel in some of our churches, and I know I'm talking to the right people.
Yeah,
All right, now. I have a degree in seminary as well, so I'm going down your lane. But I'm saying we've learned how we have to do all of these jump through hoops and give blood and give tithes and offerings. And if I go to other religions, it's not that far different either in some of those. But then we internalize that in ourselves, and we feel like we got to sacrifice so much to be forgiven and to realign. Thus, we give it to others. that in order for me to get you back in good graces, you need to prove yourself. You need to do all that, and that's not the way that the Creator created it. That's not what pure forgiveness. He went to a cross before you were born, so of course you didn't have to do anything to be forgiven. That's the same grace we need to internalize so that we can give it out.
Say that.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
I want to add to that and just kind of take a little bit of a different approach. I think one thing when you think about forgiveness and like what that means, it's going to mean something different in different situations for different people. And forgiveness does not always mean that you're going to relentlessly turn the other cheek and give that person the same opportunity to hurt you again, or wrong you again in the same way. Forgiveness is about making peace, right? And until you have made peace with that situation, you're not going to be able to think clearly, right? To put yourself in the best position to be successful, right? And for that not to bleed into other relationships, right? We talk about forgiveness, and we've had people address forgiveness of self, right? So I won't really address that as much, but I think thinking about forgiveness of another human being, I think what's tremendously important about that, it's not necessarily like others have mentioned, it's not for that person, it's for you. And the way that it's for you is because it's about every other relationship that you're gonna have, every other connection that you're gonna have down the road, and not having one situation where you're still grieving, you're still working through that, you're still hurt, right? And because of that defense mechanism or trauma that's still raw, that's going to preclude you from building the next relationship with somebody else, right? So I think it's about making peace and thinking about what you need to be okay, and then what lessons can be learned from that situation, right? But no longer carrying that trauma with you anymore.
Amen.
Great responses. We got one more question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. How would you give advice to children versus adults in building important connections?
Yeah, I think for children it's interesting because it's so natural, right? For kids, the way that they connect with people, it's so innocent, it's so organic, it's just like-mindedness, right? It's just kids playing, they see something in someone else that they gravitate towards, and they're not overthinking it, right? They just kind of follow the energy. And I think honestly, there's a lot of lessons that adults can take from kids in the way that they are they're just open, right? And they don't judge people, right? They're not quick to judge. Like, there are no racist kids, you know what I mean? Like, when you are born, you're born treating everybody, you don't know. Everything is learned, it's conditioned, everything else that comes from that. And so I think there's a lot of lessons from just seeing everybody in a child, in the eyes of a child, right? In the way that you see people. So I think, as adults, there's lessons that we can learn from that, and just seeing people for other human beings, and having the same flesh and blood that everybody else has, and just building connections.
Thank you, Doctor.
I don't think that there's a difference in the message that I would give an adult versus a child, because I think it's a human activity. Forgiveness does not have an age bracket. It does not have different steps. Now, I would frame it different because, as Forrest said, children are unpackaged. They're not burdened with all of the learned behaviors. So I think more of the concern psychologically with an adult, and the older you get, the more you have to unpack, and the more you have to fight through, and the more you have to pull up. But it's literally the same system and the same steps that a child goes through, because it's a human activity, and they're the same. Like, for me, at any age. It's just what I have to get you and pull you through after your traumas has informed your behaviors and you've learned to adapt and to be codependent and have all those different contingencies now that load the psyche. But the activity is really rudimentally the same. For forgiveness, it's the acceptance, it's the making peace with, and the release. And some things are harder to go through, and some things are a little, you find that they have layers that you think you're done, and then something else triggers, and you have to go back and do that same process again for that. But I think the process is the same for me.
Thank you.
So I'll share with you very briefly how I helped my sons understand the importance of connections when they were little fellas. So my sons are now 27, adopted, 26, natural childbirth, soon to be 25, natural childbirth, he's autistic. Prior to that, I have one sibling, a younger brother who was born with a mental disability. So in terms of connections, I had to learn very early as a little child, just using myself as an example, to help mom raise my mentally disabled brother. My dad was a U.S. Marine. He was away fighting in America's wars, Vietnam twice, Okinawa, Japan once. So it was me, mom, and my mentally disabled little brother. I had to help him out. I had to be his advocate. I had to support him. I had to keep the bullies in the neighborhood away from him because he's different. And I had to teach him from a different perspective how to connect with people that both are teasing you, but those that support you. Fast forward, I get married. My wife and I just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary, and we had this conversation with Cameron, my youngest son, about to be 25, and helping him, here we go again, wash, rinse, and repeat, being his advocate, being his supporter, being his father, and sharing with him how to make connections with people that love you and adore you, as well as those that will pick on you because you're different. Now, with each of my sons, from the time they were ankle high all the way till today, we still talk about this. We were specific in surrounding them in the front, in the back, and on the left, and on the right, with mentors and coaches that would speak into their lives beyond just their dad. It could be a friend, it could be somebody in a social or civic organization, it could be a pastor, it could be one of your uncles, it could be your grandfather, but we taught them early on about how to connect and why it's important. Your network is your net worth. Literally, everything is done by relationships. We are created to be relational. And so that's the connection. That's what it's all about. So that's the example that Kevin is providing with you and sharing with you. And even today, I tell them, who do you know in your network that can help you out? I was sharing with my neighbor in the back that my son Chris will be graduating from the University of South Carolina. He'll have his master's degree in social work on May the 6th. And I've been talking to him since last Thanksgiving. Who have you tapped into? In other words, who are you connecting with in your network so that you already have your employment sealed and delivered before you graduate, and you're not looking for a job after you graduate? Because on May the 6th, and about 27 days after that, it'll be June the 1st, and Dad ain't gonna be paying for your bills no more. We're gonna make a transition. Connect with that. Can't keep doing it forever, right? You gotta let them go.
It's done.
If I could throw like some sprinkles on top of that, I would say just like from a youth to I guess an adult, as far as like learning the process of connections. Me personally, I would say, take your time, enjoy the process, trust the journey, trust yourself. Like they were mentioning, we're conditioned in certain ways. So I would say that would be the main thing is be wary, not so much wary, but be aware of where and what you're learning, and the information that's being fed to you. Me personally, I would rather learn from someone who's been through a thing, or who can teach me something versus any old random thing online, or But yeah, that's what I would say. Just take your time and live life.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to give the panel an opportunity to have a question. What do you hope would be the lasting impact of your book? The lasting impact. And then we're going to open it up to questions.
For me, the lasting impact of my book, it's kind of similar to what I just said. My book is mainly the moral of my book is to never give up on your dreams, never give up on what you believe or what you set out to do. So that's the general gist of the message I would want people to take from the adventure that I wrote. Just to take your time, enjoy life. You know what I'm saying? It's meant to be experienced and just enjoy it.
All right, well, in the spirit of my firm, which is the Johnson Leadership Group, we're all about leadership. We encourage both inspiring leaders and seasoned leaders. And we also include, as it relates to your personal life as well as your professional life, to do three things. We want you to know better. We want you to do better so that ultimately you'll lead better. Right? Very simple. Everything is just very foundational. So the principles and the strategies that we share, we teach, that we speak about, we just want leaders to really understand how to align what's here, subject matter expertise, with what's here, the heart. Right? Because when you go to scripture, in the book of Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, the scripture reminds us to protect that heart. Okay? Protect that with all diligence, because from it flows the issues of life.
That's right. That's right.
And if we can get to a point when we lead people, again, this is in the family, your social civic organizations, your neighborhood, your workplace, your church, wherever you are, even at an event like this, remember, people want to know that you give a care about them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's very fundamental and foundational to who we are. You can be the brightest person in the world, but if you continually demonstrate that I don't really care about you, they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to follow you. These are basic core principles that we share. So that's what I really want our readers and all the organizations that we train to take away, because it sounds simple, but it's complex. And people have to be taught. And because somebody is really good at what they do, doesn't mean they need to be promoted to be leading people if they don't know what they're doing when it comes to leading people.
So, born out of pain, I was trying to find because there's a lot of lessons, a lot of messages that I think would be messages that should be perpetual. So I was trying to find one that would not make me cry, because it is my personal journey. It's my personal reconciliation to myself. So I'll say that the ability to accept yourself is the message that I would want to the little boy, to the little girl who's different in whatever way, to those who have experienced church trauma, and I believe everybody who's attended church has had church trauma. To those who have endured bullying in school. I was a product of one who was thrown down steps, who would jump on daily as an activity because of my differentness. To those who experienced family bullying, where my big brother beat me just because he wanted to change and wanted me to be able to protect myself. The latter worked, the first one probably didn't. To those who experience church bullying, where you're in church and because they have stringent rules and you want to be included and you want to be accepted and you think that's the way, you submit yourself to something that's not yourself to be recognized and they still never recognize you. So those are the messages that all of that seeks us when you learn to appreciate and accept yourself, when you look in the mirror and say, I like me.
All right.
In fact, it's my signature, and so we're going to exercise it right now. I need you to say, I like me.
I like me.
No, that was actually pretty good. That's probably the best they've done since. But I think you got a little bit more, because until you really like you, like your good, like your flaws, because they're all a part of you. Your flaws inform your strength. Your flaws inform your compassion. Your flaws inform your connectivity, your ability to show compassion and love. It's actually in your flaws, not in your good. That's where your heightened sense of confidence can come from. But you need your flaws to be able to be human. So say, I like me.
I like me. How?
My man. So, this book answers a very pivotal and incredibly important question for the Black community right now, and it's where do we go from here, right? I was, during 2020, George Floyd stuff, as I think we all were, it was not surprising to see these videos. It was obviously being, the spotlight was being shined on these kinds of videos. We'd all heard about, had friends where this had happened to, seen videos like that in the past, knew that this has been happening for decades, but now there was the spotlight on it. Now there was all this increased attention on it. And people at work and at school, or people in the white community start talking to you about it more. It's starting to become a bigger topic of conversation. Some people are angry about it, right? It's becoming more polarizing. And the question was like, what's actually happening here? What's the goal of Black Lives Matter? What's the goal of this increased attention on racism and Black trauma? And is this something that has worked historically? And is this something that's working now? So we've continued to make movies and books about the slave narrative, about Black trauma. It's been something that we have continued to consume, both Black and white people, but the majority, just so that we all know statistically, it's the majority white people consuming this stuff. And if you go back to the lynchings, this was a consumption of Black pain. This was consumed for entertainment purposes. And if you think that there's something different going on right now, I got something different to tell you, right? White people are consuming videos depicting Black murders to the tune of millions of views a day. That is very, very similar to what happened back in the day. Who do you think's going to these slave movies? It's really not Black people. It's really not. We know that happened. It's part of history, but we're not going to those movies. They're not making those slave movies for the Black community. So why are they making these movies, and what is the purpose and excuse or narrative surrounding their creation of this type of art form or this type of content and media? And really, it's all based around a awareness narrative. Awareness of the history, awareness of Black trauma, awareness of Black pain, and that is going to guilt trip the white community into changing. Listen, I hope the world changes. I hope systemic racism, direct and explicit racism, I hope that changes. I really hope it does. But I'm not going to bet my life on it, and neither should you. This book is about how can I take ownership and control over the variables within my domain and be successful anyway. And it doesn't focus on Black pain and trauma, right? It focuses on Black excellence and Black resilience. I found myself, I work for the largest law firm in the world. We have 7,000 attorneys. They made $6 billion last year. We're less than 2% Black. We've been less than 2% Black for 30 years. It's not changing. Nothing's changed. Pew Research poll. They polled hundreds of thousands of Black Americans in this country and asked them, hey, Black Lives Matter. What do you think? How did it go? 70% of Black Americans that they polled said did nothing to change my life. right? Because why? It's contributing to learned helplessness. This idea that we're waiting for white people.
Yeah.
We're waiting. Hey, white people, can we be successful yet? A couple more years? I'll check back. You guys are having conversations? I also was stunned. The majority of books written on race and racism are written by white authors to a white audience. What? I was blown away when I looked this up. I went to the publishers. They were like, "You really should write this to a white audience." I said, "Why? For what?" They said, "Black people don't read." I was like, Have you ever promoted and marketed a book to the black community? They looked at me with blank-faced, right? And then they perpetuate the narrative. Black people aren't reading. You're not writing books for black people.
That's right.
So this book, and to answer the question, it's all about black people starting to say, all right, let's try something a little bit different. I like the awareness narrative, but it's not good for black spirit. It's really not. Consuming that, the reminder over and over and over and over again, yeah. We were slaves, our ancestors, that happened. We're not slaves right now. I've said this before. We're hedge fund managers, we're lawyers, we're doctors, we're accountants, we're athletes, we're authors, we're in the Marines, we're doing all sorts of stuff. There's examples in every industry, in every sector that you can find, in business to anything. We're killing it. The focus needs to be on to increase our numbers. That's where we need to, we're killing it in every industry. You got an industry, black people are excelling at the highest level in every single one. It's just about raising our numbers and taking market share. And that's what a lot of people in power really don't want to see, because there is no everybody making it. There are so many spots. Black people need to make up some more spots, right? Big Law, for example, it's great, right? Biggest law firm in the world. They start out paying double in the six figures. We need more black people there. We need 2% is not going to cut it, right? 13% of the population is black. We should be at 13%, right? And so all that I want to see happen is a different narrative. It's not to say, Black Lives Matter and that whole narrative and awareness wasn't helpful at all and should be eradicated from the narrative. It's just that the black resilience and black excellence movement needs a little bit more steam and conversation and devotion, right? We need to start focusing on the positivity of what we can do as a community and stop looking at the white community to save us or do something. It's not going to happen. And it's contributing to that idea of learned helplessness that we're not in control, right? When you tell somebody, imagine trying to tell a teenager, you're not in control of your life, right? That we're waiting on things to happen in order for us to have a fair shake, to have a fair opportunity. And think about the flip side of kids and teenagers growing up thinking, I hope that you guys figure that whole thing out, but I'm coming like a train, and you're gonna have to kill me to stop me. Different mentality.
Thank you very much. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. Standing ovation. Magnificent job. Incredible responses. Does anyone have any questions? I know we're pressed for time. I see Arkia back there. Okay, we're good to go. Yes.
I have a question. So what is actually considered making it? Like, who are we looking at when we say, you're saying, on the Caucasian side, what is actually making it? Are we talking about financially making it, or are we just talking about making it? Because on a personal level, just looking at this where I'm at now, this is making it for me. So what is actually making it?
So that's an amazing question. So let's think about what bias means and what we need to do to overcome that. So bias generally is someone not seeing you for your true identity. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, your identity, what you believe makes you successful, what you believe you're capable of, what you want to be, whatever it is you want to achieve in your life, it's when you go try to make that happen and the other person, they just don't see you like that. They don't see you. So it could be that you want to be an author and you want to publish and you want to make a difference and you want to be a great mom. And you want like it's whatever it means to you, and it's about other people recognizing and seeing you in the way that you want to be seen. It's your intention, the intention of your identity, and people really seeing you. And nobody can tell anybody what that means in terms of who you are, right? Like success is living out your full potential of your identity and who you want to be, right? And not making any sacrifices, holding any punches, or aiming for a realistic place. Because that is something that we are facing in our communities, that people they're aiming lower. It's a big problem. People are aiming lower than they're capable of because they're scared. Because they feel like, it'll stop me. The system, it'll stop me. They won't let me do it. There's like this evil they that's gonna stop me, that's gonna stop us. And that's what I really wanna get away from. But we all decide what success means for us in our life. And that feeling like this has made it for me, love that, right? And then it's just like, where can I grow from here, right? Like, what do I wanna accomplish next year? You know, and just continuing to feel proud of yourself, right? If every year you're like, man, I'm doing it. I set these goals for myself and I'm living those. And I'm gonna continue, right? But it's all growth, right? Every year we should be, every week, every month, every year, we should be continuing to grow and move the needle, right? Move the finish line a little bit further. I don't know if others have.
Anyone?
Yeah.
I just have a simpler approach to it, and just think about it as it applies to you. So for Kevin Johnson, what does making it mean? Being a great husband, being a dynamic father, and emphasizing to my 3 male seeds to also be great husbands and be great fathers to your children. Protect your name and represent your family well. Then you have made it.
Do we have any other questions? Yes.
I just have a quick question. So in society today, the black man has a negative stereotype, thought of as less than, worth less. How did you, in your mind, change the dynamic to be able to communicate? Number 1, believe it for yourself. Number 2, express it to others. And number 3, live.
Well, I got the mic to take off here. So I don't really share it as much as I should, but not for the reason that you might think. And I'm saying all that to say, I want people to know me for what I've done, and for my merits and my skills and talents and so forth and so on. So to answer your question, I said all that to say, when I was in 12th grade, long story short, I ended up being incarcerated for 10 years. So I recently just got out, like 2 years ago, and I said all that to say, my desire, my drive, my will, my passion, all that type of stuff, to want to do better, to want to achieve these things that I know I'm capable of, that's what has led me to where I am now, and then however long it's been, like 2 years since then, I've become an author. I've published my own book. I've been in multiple movies. I've got music videos. I've so many other things. I've closed the line on the way. Finished college, while incarcerated, and so forth and so on. But I said all that though to say that for me, I would say, just the desire and the will to want to do better and to achieve more, to have more, especially like the brothers was saying, when you know you're capable of so much more. So many of us settle for crumbs when we can have so much more. Right? So that's my answer.
My one-word response is excellence. What are people gonna say when they see excellence, right? You do your best. None of us are perfect, which means we've all made mistakes. But as best you can, be excellent at what you do.
All right.
For me, it was quieting the noise. I didn't listen to them. You know, I understood. I was aware, but that I didn't internalize that. I had somewhere to be, even though I didn't know where that was. I knew I was going to be better than what I saw. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to Whitewater University, which I met people who had never seen a black person live. I'm not that old. I promise you, I'm not that old. But literally, and they told us we had a black student union, and they pulled us to the side and said, incoming freshmen, at 7:00 p.m., you do not leave off campus. Because next door to us was the Ku Klux Klan capital still. So it was very real for me what I was up against. But that I couldn't internalize that and let that be the driver in a negative way. I knew who I was, and even as I thought I knew, you learn better, but in my evolution, I just quieted the noise and focused on being the best. I can't pull anybody up if I'm down with you. So I have to first take care of me. Even on the airplane, they say, put it around yourself before you try and help your neighbor or child. You have to take care of yourself, but for me, it was quieting the noise.
Love that, super inspiring. I think for me, like, it was one of those moments like out of a movie where you're following this lead character and all these things bad keep happening to him. I was homeless for like 4 years, from 12 to like 16, and it was brutal, right? And I was not doing well in school. I was 6'6", right, big time basketball player, but I never showed up to practice because I didn't have rides. And shoes were dirty, didn't have, like, it was crazy. I was sleeping under overpasses, I was sleeping on my friends' couches. It was brutal. And I wasn't doing well in school because I was angry, I was frustrated. I was like, man, I'm 13 years old, like, this is bullshit, right? Like, excuse my language. But like, it was hard for me to even start trying in life for a while because it was like, this isn't fair, like, I shouldn't be dealing with this. And teachers were racist, like, everyone was treating me wrong, right? Like, everything was going wrong for me, right? It was like, man, I was working 6 jobs. I was working at the grocery store, Mary Brown's Chicken, I was a laborer on the side, I was at this babysitting at this daycare, and I'm trying to go to school, and I'm trying to play basketball, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm sleeping tonight. And like, that whole thing, like, over time, I started figuring out like how to succeed in that space, right? And it meant I had to think about, like, how do I make my friends' parents like me so that they'll let me sleep on their couch? Like, it's a whole different mentality of what you're thinking about, right? It's survival, that's it. And like, there was a moment where I started thinking to myself, like, this is a good excuse. Like, I can fail right now. Like, I can fail, I can end up in jail, on drugs, dead, and I have a great excuse because life has been BS. Like, it's been crazy. My real dad left me when I was 2 years old. My stepdad beat the hell out of me every single day until I ran away. And it was just a bad life. And I knew I had all the excuses to be able to say, man, let me tell you what happened to me. This is why I ended up like this. And everybody would be like, it makes sense. That's crazy. You had no type of childhood whatsoever. But I started to fantasize about this idea of, like, well, what if I just made it anyway? What if I somehow pulled this out? Right? I started to just, like, think of in my mind, like, I had to just make it up first because I didn't see it. I never met a black lawyer, black doctor, black anything successful. So, like, for me making it, I just, like, made it up. I literally was like, I want to become a lawyer, and I'm going to become a lawyer. And the only way that I can possibly do that is to get my school paid for. So I got to start focusing on basketball more because that's the only way I'm going to college. Right? There's no way I'm going to college without basketball. And so I started just thinking about things within my control that I could leverage, right? Like the book says, like basketball for me at that time was all that I had. Like literally everything that I had was the ability to bounce a ball. And I was like, how can I leverage this into something else? And then once I got into college, I really appreciated it and tried to leverage it as much as I possibly could. And I graduated 2 years early so that I could get law school paid for and play basketball at the same time. And I became the first person to ever do that. But it was all about leveraging. It was all about like, I will literally not be able to go to law school if I don't graduate 2 years early and convince some college coach out there to let me do this crazy thing. And so I think it started for me in my mind, and like there was a decision that I'm gonna make this a success story. And I'm gonna make all these people who doubted me, all these teachers who treated me wrong, everybody who disrespected me, everybody who thought I was not good enough and thought I was dumb and didn't take the extra effort to really try to reach me as a student, they're all gonna sit back and look at in 10 years from now and say, wow, holy moly, was I wrong about that kid? And the idea of that was so enticing. The chip on my shoulder was like, man, I can't wait till you see who I become. I can't wait. You're gonna choke on your spaghetti.
All right, with that, I'm going to use your word, wow. That was a wow. It was powerful. It was inspirational. I mean, we learned a lot. Truly appreciate you all being transparent and educating us and inspiring us. With that, thank you very much. God bless you all.